we're talking about a prophetic person, a person who not only predicted events of the future, but also spoke into the present. The prophets were what you would call covenant enforcers, kind of like Dirty Harry, but without the gun. See, the Old Testament, especially the first 5 books, are made up of laws. And these laws make up a covenant that the people of Israel had with God. And what do I mean by a covenant? A covenant is a contract or an agreement between 2 parties that they will be loyal to each other to death. Even if it kills me, I will fulfill the obligations of this agreement. And so the nation of Israel had a covenant, an agreement with God to be loyal to him even to the point of death, and vice versa. God had the same agreement with them. And so anytime the people stopped being loyal to this covenant, to this agreement, God sent these prophets to get them back in line, to tell the people, hey, what are you doing? We have a covenant with God. Why are you breaking the obligations of this agreement? And so that's the first thing you need to know, is that they're not just future storytellers. They spoke into a present situation. Another thing you need to know is every time you look at these prophetic books, and that's most of the Old Testament, beginning with Isaiah all the way up to Malachi before you get to Matthew. Every time you look at these prophetic books, you have to understand the prophetic perspective or viewpoint. Not only was the prophet speaking directly to the immediate context, but he was also speaking to the future context. See, right now I'm speaking to the immediate context. The people gathered here Sunday morning in Awakenings Coffeehouse. That's the immediate context. But there's also a future context, because a day from now, a week from now, a month from now, 2 years from now, you can catch the future context on YouTube. And so I'm speaking to the people that will look on YouTube as well. And so every time the prophets spoke, they saw their time period, but they also saw further along. And so when we look at the prophetic books, they're strings of sayings. It's not like a story, once upon a time and they live happily ever after. They're sayings, what they call oracles. And they were spoken against the people of Israel, saying, hey, you broke this agreement. So every time we look at these oracles or sayings, first we have to look at the immediate context. Immediate context for them is something that's far removed from us. Look at what it says in 26:1. It says, in that day, this song will be sung in the land of Judah. In that day. What was happening in that day? Well, just like we experience and we are experiencing a crisis and uncertain times, the people of Judah were experiencing uncertain times. One of the reasons was because they faced the national threat of a nation called Assyria. Now, Assyria is not around anymore, but when they were around, they were some bad, bad boys. Assyria was a nation that was bent on conquering the then known world at the time. And so they were trying to conquer the entire Mediterranean. Israel, Egypt, other countries, Moab, Ammon, the Philistines. And so one by one, they brought the army to the nation, conquered the cities, burned the cities up, took the women, took the children, and replanted their people in the other country. And so at the time, these nations were making covenants with each other. If you help me, I'll help you. We have to team up against Assyria. We used to do this on the playground all the time. You know somebody's bigger than you. You know you can't beat them. Hey, let's double team them. Let's jump them. And so they would make these pacts, these agreements. The thing is, even though they made these pacts and agreements, they still could not withstand the war machine of Assyria. And so it came down to a point where Judah didn't even have anybody else that they could make an agreement with. They were vulnerable to their enemies. And not only that, but they were not only facing national or military uncertainty, but they were facing spiritual uncertainty. At the time, the king of Judah said, hey, if their God is helping them, why don't I worship their God? Maybe he'll help me. Somebody should have told him it doesn't really work like that. But he started bringing in these other gods. And the people of Judah started worshiping these other gods. And the fate of the nation, their national identity, was at stake. And so that's the context that Isaiah is speaking into. He says, in that day. But he's also speaking of a future time. In the previous chapter, Isaiah 25, 6-12, Isaiah talks about how God is going to have this mountain where he's going to invite all the nations of the world to come have this banquet. And he's going to wipe away all of their tears. And there will be no more death and no more disgrace. Now, I don't know about you, but I experienced tears. I experienced death and loss of loved ones. I've experienced disgrace, so I know he wasn't talking about then. I know he's not really talking about now. He's looking forward into the future. He's looking at what we call the kingdom of God. Somebody's a fan of the kingdom of God. I heard that. Woo, yeah. They should have a Facebook page. Become a fan of the kingdom of God. Kingdom of God, God's rule and his reign on the earth, where he puts to rights everything that has been wrong. We have an economic crisis. We have a healthcare crisis. We have a war on terror because God is not in charge. People are in charge. People are messing things up. But there will be a day. In that day, we could sing this song.